Behind every successful endeavor in life is a relationship built on trust. Welcome to The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. A podcast focused on helping you nurture healthy relationships. Join thought leader and world-renowned expert on relationship and empowerment coaching, Dr. Patty Ann, and her special guests every week for insightful and meaningful conversations filled with great takeaways that will help you build healthier business partnerships and happier romantic relationships. Are you ready to restore trust and enrich the significant relationships in your life? The Trust Doctor, Dr. Patty Ann, is in.
Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. And I have an incredible interview for you today. And since I know you are going to like this interview so much, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to this podcast. So today, we are so fortunate to have a woman who is a glass ceiling breaker and a #1 everything. Let me just share with you a couple of her credentials, and I know you're going to want to check her out after this podcast. So I want to give you access to this incredible powerhouse. You can read about her when we're finished. So today's guest is Heather Monahan. She is rated the top 50 keynote speaker, wait for it, in the world. In the world. She is a #1 influence. She has been named #1 of the most influential women in radio. She's been named limited breaking female founder by Thrive Global. I'm so excited I can't even talk. And she's one of the few women to break the glass ceiling and claim her spot in the C-suite. Yes, yes, yes. Heather has a podcast called, she has a book called Confidence Creator that shot to #1 on the Amazon business biographies and business motivation list. And she also has a podcast that is incredible as well. And she's on the board of directors, but I could spend all our time speaking about Heather, but rather than me tell you about her, buckle up because Heather Monahan is about to take you for a ride. Welcome, Heather, and thank you so much for being on this podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
This is fantastic. You have accomplished so much in your career, your lifetime. So why don't you tell us how it started? You want to start from when you began to where you are now, going from corporate to entrepreneur, or back, vice versa, wherever you're comfortable, we're all ears.
So I grew up pretty poor in Worcester, Massachusetts, and what that gave me was
East Coast, yes.
East Coast. I started working when I was 9 years old. I had a paper route. I started bussing tables at diners, started waiting tables, bartending. I really was essentially refining my sales skills and sales approach, for almost, more than 15 years before I ever got my first real job. And then I got to corporate America, got into sales and advanced really quickly because I had all this prior experience really selling. And so,
what were you selling in corporate?
My first job out of school, I worked for the Gallo Winery and I was selling wine. Then I went from the wine business to the media business and started selling radio. And I just kept moving up the corporate ladder, ultimately landing myself in the C-suite as a chief revenue officer, and really just put in the work and kept asking for more and advancing myself. And really, I ended up being named one of the most influential women in radio in 2017. And then unexpectedly, the CEO that I had worked for became ill, and he chose his daughter to replace him, and she fired me immediately.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on 1 second. Let's go back just a little bit. You said that you kept asking for more, right? Because a lot of women are raised good girls. You wait to be asked for the guy to call or text. You wait for the promotion. You wait for the raise. usually that's waiting for Godot. So tell us a little bit about how the skill set you were able to develop along with the confidence to ask for what you wanted.
It's really around repetition, right? So I had been in sales my entire career. Sales is a numbers game. It's all about focusing on the yes, not focusing on the no's, and not allowing no's to deter you. So I was really skilled just by taking a lot of reps, a lot of asks. I became very skilled at asking for whatever it was that I wanted. And I knew it was a mathematical equation. It wasn't about emotion. It wasn't about people liking me or not liking me. It was about asking the right people at the right time in the right fashion. And I would always see it as a challenge and an opportunity, that it was almost a game for me. Okay, well, what do I want next? And I would find a way. I'd put myself in their shoes and find a way. How could I present this? How could I make this work for them such that I'll get the yes back instead of a no?
Okay. So how were you able to develop that resiliency of hearing no and not taking it as the personal rejection? Because it's not just women that happens to. It's a lot of people. So what's the secret that you have for that, for the listeners, as a nugget of wisdom?
It's not sexy. It's competence builds confidence, right? So the more you do something, the more competent you become.
Competence builds confidence. I love it. Yeah.
Yes. It's like if you're playing baseball, the first day that you get on the little league team, you're not going to be an all-star. You're not going to be the best player. But if you get there every day before everybody and take more swings and hit the ball more times, and over years, you're going to become very competent. And that competence will build confidence within you such that you're willing to swing for the fences. And so sales and business is the exact same way. I always looked at it as, okay, I've been asking for things since I was 9 years old, and I would want to add houses to my paper route, right? Or I've been asking for things from the time I was waitressing to upsell people additional food to raise the tab so that I would make more on a tip. All of these things are just putting the work in and asking. And the more that you do it, and some people will say, oh, I'm not in sales, so how do I do it? Well, start asking for things when you go to Starbucks. Hey, can I grab an extra cup with this, please? Thank you. Just start asking for small things along the way. Put those little reps in, and you'll be surprised how quickly you'll be able to see, oh, this isn't that scary anymore.
So it's so interesting that you use baseball, because baseball, perhaps more than any other sport, is a game of failure, right? If you strike out 6 out of 9 times at bat, you're batting 300 and you're a Hall of Famer. So you have to be able to take that strikeout, forget about it. Yeah, that's yesterday's news. What did you learn from it? And then move forward with the confidence that you can now achieve success, right? So I think that's a great example about the Starbucks, how to ask. How about speaking a little bit about the internal motivation, or I should say the internal inspiration, right? Because somebody can tell you to have confidence. Somebody can say, don't be afraid, don't worry, but you have to own that. So how did that happen for you? Even though you've had the repetition, right? The practice, there's still some people can do it forever and then they quit. So for you, there's no quit. So.
Well, but confidence has ebbs and flows to it. It's not a static trajectory, right? So for me, when I got divorced, my confidence disappeared. I remember thinking it's got obliterated. I did not project this in my life. How did this happen? This was not in my game plan, right? So suddenly, who am I? I'm a failure, right? So I dipped my confidence at that point in time. I had to rebuild it back up. Then the 08-09 recession hit, and I was leading a massive company, and we had to lay off 1/3 of our employees. My confidence dipped. I felt responsible for these people. There are so many times I was cheated on by the man I thought was going to marry me when I was in college, right? My confidence disappeared overnight. So I've had so many examples in my life of losing confidence that I've learned, oh, okay, I've been here before. I know that I can rebuild this. In fact, I know confidence doesn't just stay high all the time. And if you're growing and stepping into new things and trying different things and meeting new people, your confidence is going to ebb and flow all the time. So I see it as just part of that journey and part of the ride. And I remind myself, you've been here before, you know how to build this again. This isn't foreign. And one of the cornerstones for me, and I see this with a lot of people. I was actually on another podcast earlier today, and the gentleman said, Heather, I have a really hard time asking for what I want. And I see that you always ask for what you want. Why do you think that is? For me, I just know that, I get in a situation, I just know I can't do it. And he was with so much passion. He's explaining to me how he's not able to do that, but I can. And I just started laughing, listening to him. I said, listen to that story. You're a great salesperson. You just sold yourself that you cannot do it. Right. Good for you if that's your goal. And he said, well, it's not my goal. I said, then how about this? Stop telling yourself that story, which is holding you back, right? And start with that same passion and same conviction. Start telling yourself a story. Give me one time in your life you asked for something and got it. I just won. Well, I got my wife to marry me. And that was a huge win. Okay, great. Well, then tell that story the next time. Oh, you were able to get this knockout woman to marry you. You are so convincing. You are so compelling. Start reminding yourself of the win stories you have instead of focusing so much on what isn't working. And for me, I remember growing up that I was labeled the social one and my sister was labeled the smart one. And so I let that story stick with me my entire life. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but subconsciously I was telling myself that story. When I look back in business, I remember different times I was in the C-suite, right? I had the title, I have the big paycheck, and I definitely had the business acumen and experience. But I remember being invited to a meeting and the person that was hosting the meeting had an MBA from Harvard. And it's funny, I said, I'm not going to be able to make.
You're from Massachusetts, right?
I'm from Massachusetts. And so that in my world, that was sort of, the pinnacle of intelligence. And so
in their world too, by the way, Heather.
For sure. And so I bowed out of the meeting and I never told anyone at that point in time why I did. But the reason why I knew I did is I thought I'd be exposed as the social one. Maybe somehow this person was the smart one and they'd be able to identify that I wasn't. It's so interesting. Cut to in the pandemic, a professor from Harvard reaches out to me on LinkedIn because of some content I was creating. And he said, could you come in and teach a class for me? And I did. And then he ended up bringing me on during the pandemic as his teacher's assistant at Harvard. And it was such a great experience because I got to see myself through the lens that other people see me. I was scared to do it at first. I couldn't get into Harvard. I was intimidated, but I decided to show up as that real version of me and say, you know what, maybe through my experience in life, I can give them real world experience where they have, they're great at books and testing. And I wasn't great at that, but maybe my real world business experience can add value to them. So I showed up, I taught the class, we got great feedback, helped a lot of people. And I was able to decide, from now on, I'm going to put those rose colored glasses on when I look in the mirror instead of when I look outside at other people.
So I am so struck by what you're saying because as someone that has 2 master's degrees and a doctorate, right? I am amazed at how much people think that really matters. Like I know, I might get myself into trouble, Heather. I know so many idiots with doctorates. The joke is BS, bull, MS more, PhD piled high and deep, right? And I also think you're underestimating. There's a lot more involved into getting into Harvard that has nothing to do with brains. And I literally just read research specific to Harvard, but I believe in general, and don't misunderstand me. I very much value education. I think it's very important, but there's all different types of education, right? And they're talking about the kids today that get into the Ivy Leagues, what they have mastered is how to please the adults. So they please the coach, they get the starting position. They please the teacher to get the A. They please the parents to get the good girl, the good boy. And here's what we've learned, Heather, and this is what you have in spades. And you don't need me to tell you this now, right? But if we could have told our former self, they're finding that, and not everybody, not just a gross oversimplification. I don't want Harvard reaching out to me and yelling at me, but and they can, and I really don't care, but what they're finding, and I think this explains a lot for the condition of the world today, is that these kids don't know how to critically think because they don't know what they think. They don't know what they feel. What they've done is they've mastered, this is what my coach wants me to know and think. And this is what my parents and my teachers. Now, there is a lot of value. Emotional intelligence talks about understanding your own emotions, right? And being able to read that of others, right? So there's a lot of value in being able to read other people, but it's useless if you don't know where you're coming from. And I'll share a funny story. So I'm originally from Brooklyn. This is clearly not a Harvard accent. And when we moved from New York to Connecticut, my husband was working in Greenwich at the time. I was so self-conscious of my accent. And my husband was like, are you crazy? You have more degrees. You can run circles around these guys. I'm like, yeah, but they're making all this money. He goes, yeah, no. I'm like, they must be so smart. And he's like, yeah, I don't think so. And I'm like, really? Well, then I move here. I moved to Connecticut and I meet these guys and I'm like, oh my God, my husband's right. And then I learned to ask the real question. Who'd your daddy play golf with? So there's a lot of, I think so many of us don't appreciate that what we know, everybody else doesn't know. And it doesn't matter if it's from Harvard or if it's a formal education, right? And honestly, there's nothing like the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, you're so right. And for everyone listening, there's something unique and special about you that you know that other people don't. And you've got to put those rose-colored glasses on when you look in the mirror instead of just when you look at people outside of you.
Right. That is so interesting that I'm just struck for someone that's so accomplished like you, that you'd be impressed with this Harvard degree. And I guess there was a time I was too, and now I'm just like, whatever. So what would you've interviewed so many different people. I mean, your book about creating confidence, who struck you, who has struck you interestingly, and you were surprised by who they were, perhaps who they really are, as opposed to their persona?
I'll tell you, people ask me a lot, what's your favorite interview? Because I've had my podcast now for 3 years and interviewed, a lot of people. There's one that sticks out to me. There's actually two, but it's the same people. Jesse Itzler, who is an incredible entrepreneur, incredibly successful author, just an unbelievable speaker, amazing talent. That interview was so impactful for me. I went to his home, before the pandemic. I really wanted to do everything in person because I just believe that magic, that you can create when you're with two people that's when people give you their cell phone number. That's when people say, yeah, let's stay in touch, or, hey, next time you're around, let me know. And, I love that. I love that human connection. And so I had gone to meet with him. No, I mean, they're billionaires, right? Him and his wife, Sarah Blakely. And you never know when you walk in a situation like that. Is it going to be
Spanx, right? Sarah Blakely?
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
Sure. For the listeners,
And so, I didn't know he was so down to earth. The team was so down to earth. Everyone was so cool. They had food for me when I got there. I didn't want it, but you know what I'm saying? Just thought they were thoughtful, not in your mind. You might tell yourself stories about certain people, oh, they're going to be this way. And it's so funny. It almost always ends up being completely different than what you think. And he shared so much wisdom with me that day, especially around parenting, which, as you know, I have a 14-year-old son and I'm a single mom. So I'm always looking, I want to become a better mother, a better leader for my son. And so I'm always looking for ways around my child. How can I lead? And it was interesting. I was having a tough time with my son at that point in time. He'd gone away to camp. He was younger and he had a really bad experience. He felt scared. He didn't want to sleep there, just normal kid stuff. And so I started second guessing. I don't know if I send him again this summer. And I was telling Jesse about overnight basketball camp. And he was like, wait, no, let me tell you something. And it was so great. I needed someone to talk to me the way he did. He said, here's the thing. You want your son to start doing new things when he's 21 in college, or you want him never to have failed when he gets out on his own? Are you setting him up for failure? And when he put it to me like that, I was like, wow, that's an interest. I hadn't thought of it that way. He said, here's the thing, Heather, be there by his side, but then send him on his way into these scary things and let him go figure it out. He said, I promise you this year is going to be so much better than last year. But if you don't push him out there and give him that confidence to go for it, he'll be 21 years old sitting in your basement. And so that year I took his words and I pushed my son. back into overnight, sleepaway camp, and he killed it. He loved it. He had the most amazing experience, made so many great friends. And I was just so pleased. So anyways, that was a super powerful moment personally for me via that interview. And then I had the opportunity to interview him and his wife together. And that they have this amazing marriage, and they're fun and funny. And it was just so real and cool. And that was
and you got their cell phone number, I take it.
I did.
So here's what's so interesting. And this is where, as someone that focuses on trust and relationships, this is where, what happens in your business relationships is wherever you go, there you are, right? It's not different than your personal, your marriage, your parenting. Let the people that work with you and for you fail fast and fail forward. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying, and you're not innovating, right? And I could go on a whole tangent, and I won't, but I could go on a whole tangent about we're not allowing children to fail today. So it used to be the helicopter parent. Now it's the parent ahead, the snow plowing parent. So the helicopter parent at least let the kid fail and swoop in and pick them up, right? It's now the snow plowing parent goes in ahead of the kid and paves the way so they never fall and fail. And that's why for many kids, the first time they really experience failure is when they don't get into the Harvard or the college of their choice. And it's as if the sun will never set another day. And you're doing your kid a huge disservice, right? It's like the employee, the leader that's over managing on, you're never going to let your people shine. You're never going to let them reach their full potential. But I do have to tell you a really funny story about Spanx. Spanx, am I saying it right?
Yes.
Spanx. So I was at a workshop in San Diego a couple of weeks ago, co-leading a workshop. And we talked about Sarah Blakely, right? Because she's a female, we all respect her. So I said, I guess everybody there was younger than me. I said, it's really interesting what she did. And I'm not minimizing what she did, but I said, really what she did was she modernized and innovated girdles. And we're talking about that a little bit. And then a young woman turns around, she looks at me, she goes, Dr. Patty Ann, what's a girdle? She was young. So somebody else Googled girdle, and first it didn't come up. And then she showed it to her and she goes, oh, you're right. That's like, anyway, it was just so interesting, like the whole dynamic of how we evolve and grow, and what's ever relevant today won't be relevant tomorrow. If anybody's doing business today like they were 3 years ago, they're probably out of business.
And now look at Kim Kardashian with Skims, right? Which is an innovation off of Spanx. So these new iterations just keep coming in any business.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So anybody else that surprised you, maybe in a negative way, and you don't have to reveal who they were? I definitely have had the interview with someone who appears on social media to be one way and isn't genuinely that way when you're, with them. Right. So how do you reconcile that for yourself? Right. Because we all want to have our heroes, right? And then you find out maybe your hero or somebody that you looked up to is like, oh, there's
to me, it's more humanizing. Like, it almost gives you permission to be flawed, right? Like, that you see that these people who have millions and millions of followers and make millions and millions of dollars and are so successful, quote unquote, they're not really the real deal. And to me, that's like, oh, wow, that's great, because I am. Wow, I feel better about me. The way I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to be excited when they figure out that I'm really the same on social as I am in real life. So it actually made me feel better about myself.
Great. So what do you think about, and we haven't really heard about this a lot in the news lately, and I don't want to get political at all. I don't go there, but I'm wondering, as a true thought leader in the female entrepreneurial space, what do you think about the Me Too movement and the gender conversation? Do you see it playing out at all? And how can women use whatever is going on to their advantage?
I mean, I don't hear about it very much anymore. I don't,
Right.
it doesn't seem to be really as top of mind. There's so many other things now because of the pandemic and, the war and like you alluded to the new conversation around gender and gender bias and not, choosing to be male or female. And that seems to be really dominating conversations these days. So, to me, it's just all about showing up as who you are, right? And if you are in a situation where you are being harassed by anybody, a man, a woman, whoever it is at work, speaking up, asking for help and really shining a light on the challenges that you're dealing with, so that the hopes are that those people that come after you won't have to deal with those same kinds of cultures.
Right. And do you feel, because you work internationally, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the difference from an entrepreneurial perspective? Not necessarily a woman, but an entrepreneurial perspective for work being based in the States as opposed to anywhere else. Like, love him or hate him. I'm fascinated by Elon Musk for many reasons. But if you read his bio, he felt very strongly. What was it? South Africa, Canada. And it landed in the States. He felt very strongly that he had to be in the United States to be successful or to have the opportunity to do what he wanted to do. So what have you experienced with that?
Oh my gosh, I feel so blessed that I happen to be born in this country. And, for any of us that have the opportunity to live here, I'm so grateful. And to your point, there's so many issues around political and this and that, and, this division in our country, which stinks, but I still don't want to live anywhere else. I love living here. I feel so grateful for our freedom. I feel so grateful that we do have the ability to speak our mind and have a voice and not have this backlash as some other countries have to deal with. So, it's interesting, due to the pandemic, I started virtual speaking, which was new to me. But what that meant is I'm able to speak in Australia. I'm able to speak in Japan. I'm able to speak in all of these countries I, previously hadn't been traveling to. And so I see so much difference around culture through these Zoom talks that I give. And, we always do Q&A at the end, and those are really telling. But what I've learned from all of these is the most aggressive line of questioning, the most honest line of questioning always has come from United States companies, not when I'm speaking internationally, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as a quintessential American New Yorker, people say to me, gosh, it's so refreshing. You tell it as it is. You're so real. And I'm like, I don't know any other way to be, and I think that the States has allowed that for women. I've spoken in Saudi Arabia and Dubai and, places where women don't have the freedom that we have. Even London, it's just, England, it's very different to be a woman, even a female entrepreneur in Europe or in these other countries. And to your point, we're not perfect, but no other place I would want to have been. And it's interesting because when you travel, sometimes you have to be like, well, I have to be like, all right, pull it back. It might not be appreciated. And it might take a little longer because I see you're like me, you're speaking fast. I'm like, oh, here we are, and I could see other people like trying to keep up kind of thing. So tell us about your book and what inspired that and, the response you've had. Share that.
Yeah, my new book is called Overcome Your Villains. It's a 3-step process to overcome any adversity in business and in life. And I'm a big fan of data doesn't lie. So ever since I wrote my first book, the majority of DMs that I get are, hey, when's the next book coming out? Are you going to talk about the next steps, how you picked yourself up from getting fired, how you advanced yourself as an entrepreneur? Are you going to reveal, what the steps were that you took and how I can take them too? And so I would get so many of those messages that it really just directed me, okay, this is what people want me to create. I'm going to go ahead and create it. So that's really the rationale behind this new book. It's everything that's happened since the day I got fired to getting to where I am today, and what those shortcuts are that I took, what the tactics are, and what levers you can pull to do the same kind of things, no matter what situation you're in. But the key to the whole thing is really all about overcoming your villains, starting with the villains that are around you. And then once you've cleared out those villains, dealing with the biggest villain you're ever going to meet, which is the one that lies between your own two ears.
I was just going to say, so for many people, it's that inner critic, it's that inner voice, it's the limited beliefs. So what are some of the golden nuggets, right? Because, and you mentioned something about shortcuts. Are there shortcuts? Because I don't think there's shortcuts to success.
Well, I mean, there's some tactics that, definitely are going to set you up for success, right? So for example, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how did you get Gary Vee as a guest? Right? So this is a shortcut. So a great shortcut for any goal that you have, if it involves another person, take out a Google alert on that person. And so what's going to happen is every morning when you wake up, you're going to get an email from Google that's going to say, here's what's going on with Gary Vaynerchuk today. And it's going to map it out for you, giving you all of these updates and all of this knowledge to help you say, how can I leverage this information to get what I want? And so one day I saw the Google alert said, Gary Vaynerchuk just launched a new wine company with his partner, Trouty. And I thought, Gary's tough to get to, but maybe Trouty's not tough to get to. I went to LinkedIn, I sent Trouty a DM, and I said, hey, I was in the wine business for years, had a lot of success, a lot of failures, love to jump on a call and give you, the skinny on the business and hopefully set you up for more success than I had. He jumped on a call with me, I just wanted to serve and offer help. We ended up speaking for an hour. He was from Boston, I'm from Boston. We had a lot in common. And at the end of the call, he said, wow, I really owe you for this. If there's ever anything I can do for you, just let me know. And so I said, great, I'd love to have your partner, Gary, on my podcast. Can you facilitate that and make it happen? And he started laughing. He said, oh my gosh, I hate you. Yes, I'm happy to help you. And, we've become friends. He helped me to get Gary on. So that's a way to kind of cut the line, right? You don't need to. Most people are just DMing Gary Vaynerchuk ad nauseum and posting on his social media and he's not seeing it. There are different ways and tactics that you can go about things that can help you kind of leapfrog over everybody else.
So I love that because you did two things, right? That I'm sure the listeners picked up on. One is you offered to give, right? Let me share with you my knowledge, not, hey, you want something from them. And then two, you found a connection, right? So you're from Boston. You and I, before we started the call, like, oh, we're both from the East Coast, right? So you look for that commonality to build the relationship. But I am surprised you asked for the Gary connection right at the end. I would have thought you waited till the next email. Just thought
No. Once he opened up that floodgate, I was all in.
I think that's great. If to all the listeners out there, if that's the only thing, only in quotes, you learn from every podcast you listen this week, Heather has just given you probably $1 million worth of gold right there. I mean, that is brilliant. So I am so anxious to hear the other two.
So, basically in every chapter, I have outlined different hacks and tactics that people can implement in their business, whether I do a chapter on how I landed my TEDx talk and then how I prepped for it, right? So how to give a big speech, how to give a big presentation, what are those tactics that are involved, and then how to actually land a TEDx, because people think it's so hard, to get it. And it's not that hard. So, the skinny on that is I took out a Google alert on TEDx speakers wanted, right? Of course, because then I get an email every morning telling me, Heather, there's 5 opportunities that you can apply for. It's a numbers game, right? But then what I also learned is everyone that's putting the TEDx event on is a volunteer. So instead of making it about you in the pitch, saying like, I'm a great speaker, I'm going to add value, make it about them. So wow, thank you so much for volunteering. It's so great to see that you've made this, part of your life's work, that you're giving up so much time. I'd love to come in and support you. I'd love to sell out the arena for you. I'd love to promote it on my social media. I'd love to support you at your VIP sponsor events. I'd love to get behind you in anything that you guys are doing to really try to bring my value and support. Would love to have a conversation around this, right? So making it about recognizing what they're doing and then supporting their efforts, which really isn't about your speech. It's more about they have goals. They need to sell their events out. They need to have sponsors. And how can you help add value and support that? And then from the speaking standpoint, the key is really you're supposed to be sharing an idea. Like, what is this game-changing idea, thought we're sharing? And then how does it tie back to their theme? So you need to do your research. You need to go to their website. You need to read about the theme that they've chosen for this event. And for mine, it was rethinking relationships. And so my original pitch was, first, I made it about them. I told them that I have a good social media following. I will sell out the arena. I will promote it until you have no tickets left. That's a commitment I make to you, right? Like, I am your partner in on this, if you add me to the lineup. And then I went on to pitch, okay, rethinking relationships. Let's rethink the relationship between C students and the C-suite. I was an average student in school, but I made it to the C-suite, which is, only a very, very small percentage of women do that. So I was, proposing this idea that you don't need to your point earlier, be an A student to find business success. In fact, I believe that being more of an average student will launch you to that business success. So that was what I led with. And then a month before giving my talk, they actually challenged me to dig deeper. They wanted something a little grittier. And we ended up coming up with my new talk, which was re-examining the relationship with women in business and how it's worse than the Me Too movement, that should have been the real movement around identifying the female bullies at work and how much havoc they wreak for other women.
Wow, that's amazing. And so basically you went with how women don't support other women at work.
Oh yeah, to me, that's the biggest elephant in the room in any business situation or equation, is that, people believe, or I used to believe for sure, that, wow, women will be my biggest advocates and they'll be my cheerleaders. And it was funny what I found. My biggest cheerleaders in a male-dominated industry were men. My mentors were men. The people who supported me, promoted me, men. Never at one point, this is back in corporate America, it's very different from you today. I have tons of phenomenal supporters, you being one of them, a woman supporting other. I have so many, Amber Lee, I have so many cheerleaders and champions and partners out there that are female. However, that was not the case in corporate America. It was more of this idea of scarcity. Like, there's one seat at the table that a woman can claim, and I'll be damned if she's going to get it. I'm going to cut her out. I'll find a way to get rid of her and cut her out of the loop. I'll get it. And that was what I remember, or how I really felt treated when I was back in corporate America.
So it's so interesting you say this. So I do a lot of work. I go into companies and I'll create women's councils or women's programs to empower women and literally move the needle. So there's one company I've been working with for a while, and it's a tech company. And when I went in, I think they had, I'm making the numbers up, but maybe they had 4% women. And now we have 34%. And the elephant in the room was, it was incredible. We had the support of the chairman of the board and the CEO, who is in my Fab Five, if you will. Great guy, very much supports women, doesn't just give it lip service, truly puts, and created a whole structure. And it was a strategy, right? Because we want the right people. We don't want you second guessing, saying, oh, you're a woman. And then we were having a conference and I said, look, we have to address the elephant in the middle of the room, which is women not supporting women. But what I have said, and it is changing, although not as rapidly, in COVID, everything's up in the air, right? However, this is where I feel you alluded to it, but I want to just take it a little bit deeper. If there was 10 executive positions, and only one of them was for a man, they would be killing each other too for that one spot, right? So it's not like, oh, what's wrong with you women? Well, men, I truly believe, would be the same, act the same way if there was only one seat at the table for them. What do you think?
I mean, it's interesting because that's never the case. So we don't really know, right? So it's kind of a tough question to answer because we don't have any data to support it. So just, I guess, theoretically, it makes sense what you're saying. However, I still go back to my personal experiences. Let's give an example. When I was in leadership in media and I would have one sales management opportunity open, right? It was either a man's getting or a woman, didn't matter to me. I didn't care. I wanted the best person in there. And what did that competitive landscape look like? Because I'd get, let's say 6 people were applying for the job, 3 men, 3 women. When I look back, I did not, at least in my experience, I did not see the men try to sabotage the other competitors the way I did with women. And I almost feel like culturally, through media, through movies, whatever it is, that there's been this narrative that, you know, women sabotage other women, and that it's okay, and that, you know, that they're not really cheerleading for one another. And somehow that scarcity mindset, that to me, it's so prevalent in corporate America. And just in my experience, I did not see it the same way in the situations when I saw men competing for a role or a seat at the table.
I totally understand what you're saying, and you're right, it's hypothetical, but I do feel that it would be, I don't think men would be so collegial and so into mentoring and sponsoring other men if there was truly one seat in my company and one seat in your company and one seat in the company. Now, it just common sense dictates to me, right? Sure. Survival of the fittest, if you think about it. But COVID, of course, has changed everything. Prior to COVID, I did see it start to shift. I hate to say it. I think there's been a little bit of regression. I think there's been a regression for women in the workplace everywhere. Hence, I believe, and I think this is the good news, that's why women are starting businesses and becoming entrepreneurs in record numbers. And we are so going to change the world, right? Because if you give a man money, he'll buy a toy. If you give a woman money, she'll feed her village, so to speak. All right. So that's a great. And number 3, I'm so excited you're being so transparent, because people will absolutely buy your book. We will make sure of it. But the third hack.
So I was mentioning about giving presentations, right? And that's something I have a lot of experience with. I've been doing it my entire career, and now I've built my speaking business around speaking, right? So I'd like to share with people, and this is for a mom that's on the PTA. This is for a person giving a toast at a wedding, right? Like, if you, at some point in your life, you're going to need to speak up and give a talk or a presentation. You don't have to be a sales leader or a keynote speaker to do it. And when you do, I want to empower people to be as successful as possible and be heard, right? Because it's really about, we live in a noisy world. People are always on their phones. They're not paying attention. It's very challenging to grab someone's attention in this day and age. And so I like to set people up for success and give them the tools that I've learned. Number 1, I will always believe this, leading with a personal story anytime, whether you're giving a toast, whether you're speaking at a PTA meeting, or you're giving your TED Talk. Lead with a personal story to captivate and pull in the audience. The most critical portion of a talk is really that first minute, right? Where people are going to decide, am I listening? Is there something to learn or add value to my life here? Or is this boring and I'm checking out and I'm going to be on my phone texting everybody that I know for the next hour, right? So really focus in on, and I believe in testing and trying things with different groups. My poor son, I'm constantly standing up for him and saying, tell me what you think about this lead in for my talk, this week. And then I'll test it on him. He'll be like, oh, I thought that was super boring. Now I liked it better when you did this one. And he'll remind me.
Leave it to kids, man. They'll be brutally honest.
But that's what we need, right? Like, so many people say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm too nervous. Listen, the real day is the day you give the talk. Let these little moments with your friends, your family, whoever, strangers, or just record yourself on a video and see what you like and don't like. But put that work in, show up and do the reps, right? Then the other thing is you want to make it about the people that are there, right? You want to tell them what value are they going to get out of being there with you, so that they want to hang in till the end, right? And maybe you're like, all right, listen, this is going to, I come in really high energy. And if that resonates with you, you definitely want to jump around ahead of time. You want to listen to your playlist of your life that fires you up, so that you're going in there saying, okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to change one person's life. I'm doing this to add value. Really make it about that why, so that it can help you push through that fear. Anytime you feel nervous before a presentation or a talk, remind yourself there's a fine line between fear and excitement. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited. And the more you start telling yourself that, you start believing it. Then I write on the bottom of my shoes, I can, I will. Write a message to yourself to remind yourself how amazing you are. Look at 3 other times in your life that you did something big that you were afraid of, and say, I lived through that. This is proof, social proof, that this is going to go well today too, right? Like, I really put in the work to remind myself. I wear a power color. When I was nervous for my TED Talk, and I was so nervous for it, I wore blue, because that blue and red are like my go-tos. If I'm nervous, I'm doing so, I need every little help that I can get, right? So I want to get my hair done. I want to get my makeup done. I want to wear the dress that makes me feel like $1,000,000. I invest in me because it makes me feel really worthy and remind me like I am worth all of this work. I am worth taking this stage. Then I lower the expectations on myself. Right before I walked out to give my talk, I said, if you don't walk out there right now, you'll never forgive yourself. If you walk out there and blow it, I'm going to be so proud of you. And I just took all the pressure, and really, you need to do that in these moments where you're in a pressure cooker and you're putting too much pressure on yourself. Hey, it's about showing up and doing it. It's not about anything else. And too often we get caught up in that. I use other hacks like lavender. Scents for me are a really big thing, right? So I constantly have lavender in my back pocket so I can get centered, get calm, remind myself of other times that I've taken big stages and how I felt, how I impacted people. I keep a file on my phone called Fam Love. And anytime I get a beautiful note about how my book changed their life or a talk changed their life and how they left the bad marriage or left the job, I save all those. So when I start doubting myself or getting scared, I go to Fam Love and I start reading. And when I read that, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going out there to take this stage right now, right? So maybe you're giving a toast for your best friend at their wedding and you're so scared and so nervous. Go back and read that letter that she wrote to you when she asked you and said why it was so important that you be the one to give that talk. Make it about them and stop making it about ourselves. And that can propel us through those real nerve-wracking moments.
That's great. And you mentioned colors. I don't know the frequencies, but I know there's such thing as frequencies attached to color. And so I find that interesting. And I think lavender is known to be a very soothing. So that very interesting. So you feel that, and you also talked about the being, afraid and being excited. So I love to dabble in neuroscience. I dare say I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination.
Me too, don't worry.
Great. I don't play a neuroscientist at work and I don't play one on TV, right? But apparently fear and excitement, and I'm very much into the mind-body connection more and more and more. And because we have functional MRIs that can show us this stuff, right? So apparently fear and excitement biologically in our body shows up the same way. It's a matter of how we label it. And that's what you just said. That's brilliant. And I want the listeners to hear that. You define what you want that emotion to be. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, right? So we can make it fear that paralyzes us, or we can make it excitement that cheers us on, right? And
exactly.
Then energy. And then the other thing that you said, which I think is so important to just sum up for the listeners, is that when you're nervous, afraid, never did it before, all normal, natural. Some of the best speakers in the world I know are vomiting in the bathroom before they go on stage. You would be shocked as to who they are. They do this as well. And you say, okay, when have I done something before that I thought I couldn't do? When have I put limitations on myself? And then I found out they were just my own limitations. And if I could do that, then I can do this. If you remember when you first started to ride a bike, it was petrifying when the adult let go of the seat. Now you look back and you say, I was afraid of that. That's easy breezy. That is true for us throughout every area of our life, and certainly in our careers and our work. Oh my gosh, Heather, I want to be respectful of your time. I could talk with you forever. I want to leave you with one question before you can tell people how they can find out more about you. What is the one book that you most recently reread and why?
I am really into this Dr. Joe Dispenza right now. It's so
oh
interesting.
My goodness, yes.
You're talking about mind-body connection. It is not for the faint of heart, right? So it's interesting. The teacher shows up when you're ready to learn, right? And I'm sure I could have been exposed to his material, and probably was a few years ago, but I wasn't really as open-minded, right? Yeah. And so I'm like all in on this. I just bought his other book, and I've read this book now on Audible 3 times. And I just, some of this information there's so much information and knowledge there that I have to keep listening again and again, because I'm learning something new every time I listen. And it's also serving as a reminder for me. And to your point around neuroscience and, understanding the brain and that mind-body connection, wow, some of this stuff is so different than what we learned growing up. And it's so powerful that my tendency is to go back to my old way of thinking, just out of habit. I'm 47 years old, and of course be like, oh, I remembered it this way.
It's our comfort zone. It's our comfort zone.
And I have to pump the brakes, and I put this Audible back on, and it's really been a powerful experience. I highly encourage his work for anybody to check it out if they're interested.
That conference event I was telling you about, there were 3 people there that are huge Dr. Joe fans. And I can tell you the things they have experienced. They just came back from a 3-day retreat with him. And it's interesting because he speaks, the work that he does explains why placebos work, because we think we were given a drug. So our mind, our neural pathways, which is connected to our spinal cord. I have a medical background, right? It works the same way the drug works. Absolutely fascinating. And this is ancient wisdom, pre-AMA, right? Pre the pharmaceutical companies. And it's fascinating. Okay, Heather, how may people find out more about you? Where would you like them to go?
Yeah, my website's heathermonahan.com. I'm on all social media at Heather Monahan. My podcast is Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan. And my books are Confidence Creator and Overcome Your Villains.
Great. So Heather, thank you so much. This is absolutely fascinating. Thank you for your time and all your wisdom. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And if you like this, and I don't know how you could not have loved this interview, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to today's podcast. Thank you again, Heather. And until next time, be well.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.